One thing that I have really been advocating even before I was an engineering leader was engineers being more involved earlier in the process, because people don't know what's easy and what's hard. They don't necessarily know what they want, and they will sometimes self-censor. Pushing that earlier in the process helps avoid getting to the end, and that's actually not what we wanted at all.
Welcome to the Hallway Track. I'm Chris Vinoy. This week I'm sitting down with Patrick Byrne, Vice President of Engineering at Dribbble. That's with 3 B's. Pat's been running engineering there and on a 17-year-old Rails monolith through every process trend of the last decade. They've gone from strict sprints to rigid gating, multiple rewrites of the How We Work doc, and he and his team have landed back almost exactly where they started at the very beginning. We get into why his team rejected formal process like a virus, what hiring for judgment actually looks like in this day and age, and why he wants every senior candidate to tell him about a time they took down production. If you've ever bolted on process to solve a real problem, then watch that process become the next problem. This episode's for you. Howdy, folks. Welcome to the Hallway Track. My guest today is Patrick Byrne, the Vice President of Engineering at Dribbble. Howdy, Patrick. How you doing today?
I'm doing pretty fantastic. How are you doing?
I am fan-freaking-tastic as well. Patrick and I have known each other for quite some time now. We both have a background long ago in like newspapers and journalism and all sorts of fun stuff like that. But that's not why we're here today, just to reminisce. So why don't you let folks know what you're doing today at Dribbble and kind of what Dribbble is for those who don't know, the very few people on the internet who don't know.
Absolutely. Dribbble.com. It's a social network for graphic designers to share their work, get inspired by the work that other people are doing, but also, maybe more importantly, to also get hired and find other designers to work with and work for. Either get hired, full-time design gig at some company, or doing part-time work on their side, or full-time contract work for clients. Anywhere you want to do to, if you're doing graphic design, if you want to be seen, you want to see other people, Dribbble.com with 3 B's.
What's engineering look like at Dribbble today?
Yeah, it's a pretty small team. And Dribbble.com is a Rails monolith that is now over 17 years old. And so it's been through its fair share of the ins and outs and ups and downs of Rails and Ruby. Like I said, it's a small team, 3 front-end engineers, 3 back-end engineers, and me, who I've got my hands in the code with a back-end engineering and infrastructure background. They couldn't keep me out if they tried. And yeah, so we're working on continuing to build and evolve the site, and working in a pretty structureless environment, actually, with a couple folks on the product team, and working not really in like sprints so much, kind of taking a lot of the lowercase a agile best ideas, and really working with engineers really tight in the loop on product design, product decisions, and so on, and really, really deeply integrated on kind of like a continuous, if I could think of a word to describe it, would probably be continuous delivery is the closest, where we're working in tiny increments. So it's the smallest change that we can make to rolling out dozen deploys a day, slowly incrementing the product forward.
Oh, cool. I got lots of questions about how, like, logistics of that. But before we get that, has it always worked that way, or did you like sort of evolve into this over time?
We've absolutely evolved into this. When I joined, it was a team of 5 folks, and almost everybody was touching the code at some point or the other. This was, I think, before like GitHub pull requests were really a thing, perhaps, or at least very, very early days. And it was pretty loosey-goosey. Over the years, we've grown and shrunk as a team. At one point, we had, I think, at least a dozen folks kind of dedicated working on Dribbble.com on a daily basis. And so you feel the growing pains, you feel the pains of change as the teams change and as the culture changes and evolve. We've tried adding a lot of process at various points of the way. We were doing really strict sprints at one point, and we ended up rejecting that after experiencing quite a bit of friction. And
like a body rejecting a virus? Or?
Body rejecting the virus is we were finding ourselves working for the process rather than the process helping support us to do the work. And, we've had, I can't think of how many versions of the How We Make Dribbble document in our documentation of various degrees of formality over the years, adding layers of review, adding dedicated, like, specified time for planning, implementation, QA very firmly gating those processes. And ultimately, we ended up almost pretty close to the way things were at the beginning. Now that we're a smaller team again, as well, where it's a very trust-based system and it's a very much you own your work system, where everyone kind of controls what it is that they're doing, and they're the arbiter of, is this good enough to deploy outside of QA? And if it's user facing, we maybe have a little bit more input from, it doesn't go live until product says it's ready to go, but like at a code level, at a PR level, is this good? Is the code reviewed? Are the tests passing? Do we feel confident in the ability? And then you're the one that deploys your own work. And if it goes poorly, if there's an error or, a small error that you could fix, or a large catastrophic error that actually we need to pull that back.
Yeah.
That's you too. And that's quite a bit of responsibility for such a large site, such a site with a large
That's what I was going to mention.
history.
Yeah, it's a little bit interesting because like the workflow you're describing as sort of like what Dribbble started as, right? And then you went much more rigid and more process and everything else, and then reverting back to what was at the beginning, where at the beginning, like you don't have a lot of traffic, you don't have a lot of downside risk, right? Like it's, a site goes down and no one's going to care. If the site goes down tomorrow, people are going to care, right? Yeah, so it's interesting. What did you have to do to be able to get that sort of process back, or I'm going to say lack of process, but it's not really a lack of process. There's a process there, right? How did you get back to that?
That's a good question, and I think there were kind of two different ways that ended up happening. One were the very large breaks where we, at a retro or at just an ad hoc meeting that we feel was necessary, kind of looking back and say, hey, that didn't go great. What's up? An important part of that is building a safe, a safe team for people to feel comfortable to say what is on their mind, and that's where a lot of times I was hamstrung by this, that, the other. I couldn't, I didn't feel comfortable doing whatever, and really realizing that, like this framework that we'd built, that we'd kind of grown over the years to respond to prior pain, was actually causing its own pain, and like. There have been a couple of times where we just took a sledgehammer to it and we're like, screw it, we're starting with a blank sheet of paper. How should we do this? Those are very few and far between. What is much more common are, we have kind of what we call like a mini retro, because it's really it's stand up every Friday. We take a couple of minutes and ask what went well last week, what went less well last week. And from that, are there things that we should do more of? Are there things we should do less of? What can we try differently? And that's where I think the real work is much like we're kind of slowly iterating on the app, changing and evolving it, adding things, removing things, refining things. We're doing the same with the process of, this slowed down because I couldn't get code review. Hey, GitHub can send Slack reminders to, hey, these are the PRs that need code review. Going back to maybe the code review is, if it needs to be out now, don't move on to the next thing while you're waiting for code review. Just drop in the product channel. I need code review here. Who's available to take a look at it? And really being the advocate for your own work. I don't know why I'm talking about code review. That's not even a problem that we really have anymore.
Well, it's code review is the thing that like everybody that's suddenly adopting all these AI workflows, and it's like, well, we can produce code like crazy now, but nobody has time to code review. And so they end up blaming it for the bottom mark. Yeah, when it's really the approach I took lots of times when I was leading engineering teams is saying like, whatever is closest to production has the most priority. Right? So code review has more priority than writing new code, right? Because that's something that's closer to production, right? Or something that's on the testing environment. Your job is to get it off that testing environment as fast as you can. Like you're taking up valuable space in a lot of cases to get it out the door and keep the train running, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I mentioning before, like building, how can we build this in the smallest possible increments? That came out of years of merging giant branches that have been alive for 2 months and dealing with the inevitable nonsense that comes there. Well, how can we make it smaller? How can we ship part of this? How can we ship something that is maybe not user visible and make it user visible later, either through feature gates or building the back end and then building the front end? And just how can we turn this 100-line PR into 5 20-line PRs?
Yeah, and the 100-line PR always has like you covered over a lot of stuff with like the nonsense. like code review is never going to catch everything. That's true even at a one-line PR sometimes. Like you're not going to catch everything that's going to go wrong, and especially in 100 lines, right? So you're going to end up pushing bugs to production in a lot of cases, or you're going to have so much time spent in code review that it takes forever to get out the door. And then when it does, you're still going to have bugs in it, no matter how long you took.
Exactly. You could spend weeks on QA and still not catch the bugs that our users are going to immediately find by typing in, an email address that's 1,000 characters long. You didn't think about that, did you?
Yeah. Well, especially at your scale, like you've got like the millions of monkeys on the millions of typewriters problem of like every edge case you can think of, somebody will find.
Exactly. Got a flurry of errors in our error tracker this morning that lit up Slack, and me and another engineer looked at it. We're like, oh dang. Thought maybe it was related to something that shipped that morning or something shipped yesterday. No, it was a penetration tester just sending garbage payloads to various things, and we were expecting this to be a string, and it was an array, and so the back end rejected it. The hacker didn't get in, but it did trigger an exception that there's no down case method on arrays.
Yeah.
Okay.
Speaking of error tracking, what are you using these days?
Honeybadger, love that stuff.
Oh, yeah, so do I. I've got a t-shirt in my drawer and stickers on various laptops. They're probably just out of screen here, some laptop cover. Yeah, I've always found that super helpful. That's sort of like one of the goals I usually had was like finding the error at the same time the customer does, right? So that my team knows at the same time the customer knows. And then our goal was to fix it before that customer can contact customer support, right? Because the best thing in the world is when customer support can say, try again, we already fixed it. And it actually makes customers happier, right? It's like, I helped them out. I discovered something and got it fixed. No time at all.
It takes a lot of effort to exceed expectations, but when you can, it feels so good.
Yeah, it feels good. So good. And that's sort of, lots of times teams don't have that same sort of error infrastructure, right? Where like they can get notified immediately. They got to go digging through logs to go find it, right? Which is like, I remember when Honeybadger like first came on the Ruby scene like a long time ago, and it really enabled teams I was working with to work just faster, right? When you can have that visibility into the inevitably broken stuff, right?
It's gonna break. You simply cannot write bug-free code. I've been telling my team to do so for years, and it hasn't stuck yet. So I'm simply accepting that bugs are an inevitable part of writing complex software.
Yeah. It's one of those things where like the phrase I would use lots of times is like the only bug-free code is code you've never written. It doesn't exist. Every line of code is also a possible bug, right? So when you start moving into a world where you consider them to be inevitable, you start building systems to recover from it faster, because you start to realize no matter how hard you try to prevent it, no matter how much you put into code review, no matter how much you put into QA, into testing, and anything else, which are all good things. Don't get me wrong. Like, do those things. They're good. But
absolutely critical.
Yeah. But even once you do all those good things, stuff's still going to get out. Right?
Can't think of how many times I've had the conversation of, a green build, your tests are passing. All that proves is that your tests are passing. It doesn't prove that the app does what it's supposed to. It doesn't prove that the app is bug-free. It just means that the test pass. QA passing just means that the things we thought to test worked or worked good enough. And it's not, you don't know until it's out there.
Yeah. The other thing, and I'm curious about how this works at Dribbble, is like, oftentimes, like I tended to work with engineering teams with like, we baked in two assumptions when we built our process, right? One is the one I just mentioned, like assume all the code we're writing has a bug in it somewhere, right? And the second one was like, we probably aren't building the right thing, right? Like we're often working, in my case, lots of what I worked with was like B2B software where we're selling to companies that have like a sales team and like that sort of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. And there's contractual obligations there.
Yeah. Sometimes there's that, and there's sometimes the product folks are talking to customers that don't actually know what they want, right? And it's that blank page problem where like if you tell them like, oh, what if it did this? And they get all super excited and like, sure, that's great. Right? But then when you put it in front of them, it's like, no, that's not what I meant at all.
Those clarifying questions can be really important. I mentioned before that our engineers are really heavily involved in the product process. And that actually is an outcome of some of those other conversations of like what didn't go well there is one thing that I was really been advocating even before I was an engineering leader was engineers being more involved earlier in the process. Because just like you said, people don't know what's easy and what's hard. They don't necessarily know what they want, and they will sometimes self-censor of like, well, I'm not going to ask for that because that's too wild. But with an engineer in the room or an engineer very closely thereafter can tell you that like, actually, that's easy, that's easy, that's easy. This one little bullet point is 80% of the scope. How important is it? Oh, it's not important at all. Good to know. We're going to
How about we don't do that?
Then okay, we'll resource for that. Then we will plan for, the math that we have to invent for this feature. But pushing that earlier in the process helps avoid getting to the end, and that's actually not what we wanted at all. There's nothing more humbling than watching somebody try to use your software. Like, we spent so much time making this easy to use. How do you not see that button? And it's because it's not their job to see the button. It's not their job to know how it works. It's our job to make it easy for them to use it.
Yeah. Or realizing like, oh, people actually do try to tab through forms, like, or not.
Accessibility
in
matters.
some cases. yeah. Accessibility. That's a whole other. We only have a half hour today. Let's save that for episode 2 sometime. We can talk about that. What is there? The other thing I'm interested in is a little bit like nerdier engineering sort of stuff. It's sort of the evolution of a software engineer, right? Where it's like you start your career writing very, well, these days, who knows, but you're writing very standard sort of code, right? And then you start getting clever for a little while. And since we're both Rubyists, you start doing like meta programming and like stuff like that. And then I think once you do this long enough, you turn back around to writing the very boring stuff all over again. Is that a similar sort of thing?
That's been precisely my trajectory. I've been writing Ruby since before Rails came out. I remember being very thrilled when Rails was announced because it gave me an opportunity to actually use it for real projects instead of like shell scripts. And I've been through various ups and downs of best practices just even in that space. And there is when you're younger and you're very ambitious and you're very proud of the work that you're doing, you're like, valuing the terseness, like, here's a one-liner, here's meta-programmed to Sunday kind of. I wrote software that built my software. Then you end up having to fix the bugs that are inevitably triggered by that, and realizing you have to be smarter than the guy that you were last week to be able to figure out what it is that you missed when you were there. And then I had a kid, and then it really felt like I lost 20% off the top there. Is I wasn't sleeping well. I was and I had so many other things going on in my mind, and I realized and I'm getting older, my brain isn't literally not working as fast as it used to. And, all of those kinds of pushes on it made me realize that being clever just has no value and frequently negative value. And a thing that we frequently say to ourselves in our team is like, imagine a very stupid person is looking at this code, because that's probably going to be you. And can a very stupid person understand this? And if the answer is no, then let's pull it back a little bit. Or, what idiot wrote this? Get blame. That idiot was me 2 years ago.
Oh yeah. There's always multiple reasons for multiple costs for code in a way, right? There's the actual literal cost, performance costs, this branch of code will take a little bit longer, something like that. But there's also that sort of cognitive cost, right? Where you have to explain it, or you have to have an AI model choke on it later on. To put it in today's terms, right? You're not having to explain it quite so much sometimes, but instead you throw some AI model and it's I've never seen anything like this in my training model. I don't know what this is. I'm going to make some stupid guess.
Or a junior engineer doing the exact same thing.
Yeah, the exact same thing. It's it's kind of funny how the most stock, speaking specifically of Rails apps, the most stock, boring, by the boilerplate Rails app, I've experimented around with AI tools in those, and they just fly. It's fantastic, right? As long as you follow. This was always true. I remember saying this in Rails apps again 15 years ago. Just follow the conventions. Don't do anything weird. You'll be fine, right? Yep. And it turns out that was the right choice all along. Who knew?
All along. It turns out that you just put the code where it belongs, and you call the methods as they should be, and a lot of it becomes much easier.
Yeah, do all the boring stuff everybody else expects, and it'll be fine.
Do you feel the thrill of discovery? maybe not. Is that
No.
okay? I
Yeah.
would say it probably is.
The trick is you got to find that in other parts of your life, which, kids help, but
That is a never-ending adventure. That is for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, lots of discovery.
I want my day to be boring. I want my day to be so boring because it's all I have the energy for sometimes.
The other thing I'm curious about, you kind of mentioned at the top, you're still in code like all the time. How do you manage? I've always found that difficult, the balance of I'm in code all day and I'm managing people. How do you manage to balance that? I'm
Not
honestly looking
great.
for tips.
I manage it probably better than before. But when I was a baby manager and trying to do everything, and was also still my code output was my definition of success, and trying to both it. I did both poorly. I did both absolutely terribly. I should have focused on becoming a better manager, but I haven't had to of late because, like I mentioned, the kind of the ups and the downs, the growing and the shrinking. We ended up kind of selecting for a team that, like I mentioned earlier, it's kind of a big responsibility, but it's also a pretty big opportunity to like wear a lot of hats and have a really huge impact, both inside the organization because it's a small team, but also on the world, at large because Dribbble is, top 1,000 site. But we've selected for people who wanted that, who gave a crap, and who at this point kind of don't really need managing. I'm frequently spending a little bit of time of one-on-ones kind of apologizing, like, yeah, I haven't really been paying too much attention to what it is that you're doing. Let's talk about it. How can I, what do you need? And they're like, I don't really need anything because if I had a question, I already asked it. If I needed help with something, I already reached out to me or to other members of the team that like I had a need and I solved it. And sometimes I'm part of that solution, but a lot of times I'm not. And I'm having to remind myself that's also what successful leadership looks like. But, I rue the day where I have to start actively managing my team, or there's some performance management, or something that needs to come in because I worry that I'm a little rusty there, because I really do get to spend most of my time. Our CEO calls it the Pat lane of it's just knucklehead distracty stuff that like kind of needs to happen, or it needs to be explored, but like the team is humming, the team is focused, and that focus is incredibly important. And we could throw a bunch of stuff on their plates, but then they're going to slow down, and they're going to get distracted, or they're going to be thinking about three things at once when I really need them to focus on the one thing, and then tomorrow think about the second one. So like I'll just kind of put that on my plate and go heads down for maybe a couple of days and come up with like, here's 80% of a solution, and I need the team to now participate in like making it real, or like here's an exploration. This is worth pursuing. Let's put it on the roadmap. This is an exploration. This is not worth our time. Let's not.
Yeah, that's sort of proof of concept work. The like this may not turn out to be a thing at all, but like I'll hack something together and we'll see if it actually does anything, and then we turn it into a real boy at some point.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, our search vendor got bought by another company, and thankfully with a bit of a grace period, but like we will not be renewing your contract, which meant we needed to find a new tool for doing our searches, and we
Yeah.
thankfully had already been kind of on the fence of like, do we fire these people, and use a new tool? Yeah. So we were kind of a little bit bootstrapped already on that front. But that was like, boom. That's what I did for about 6 weeks. Was we had a hard deadline, and it's like we just need to like, let's do that, and it kept the team focused on the 3 months of kind of roadmap that we had defined for a big product launch that we were expecting by the end of that year. And so I was able to really take that on and say, if anybody needs anything, holler. But otherwise, this is what I'm doing, and it worked very smoothly. And I feel incredibly fortunate. I feel like I can probably take some credit, but most of the credit goes to the culture that we've built and the team that we've fostered.
You mentioned like kind of selecting for that sense of ownership, and like when I would phrase it as like has an appropriate sense of shame, right?
I think
or the other way to say it is like they care, right? Like
exactly.
I used to say like as long as they care, I can make everything else work, right? How do you select for that? Well, actually, let me back up. Do you even hire all that often anymore? Or is your team like remarkably stable?
We haven't hired anyone for about 18 months now, and we got real lucky and managed to, when we were hiring, we were looking for a front-end engineer and a back-end engineer, and there have been times where the search has been months, and in this case I think we found them all within a couple of weeks. And it's funny, they're both named Marcelo and they both started on the same day. So there's a lot of contention about, well, depending on who's having a better kind of run of things, like who's real Marcelo and who's backup Marcelo, which is a fun thing to bandy around. But the hiring process it's also gone through various levels of rigor and various levels of process. But right now, it's what it mostly is me and one of the engineers on the team that we're hiring for, and it's about an hour to 90 minutes, kind of after they've gone through a screening call with our HR. And we kind of, I would love to be able to send people home projects and like come back and show me, spend a couple hours and fix this bug on this thing. That had always ended up being just like a real selector for like, people don't have time, or like your test is either too contrived, it's either too simple or it's too hard. And what really turns into is we really kind of honed it down to, we've got a mock-up of the Dribbble.com homepage, and we're like, let's imagine that the code got nuked and we're starting from scratch. There's no prior art. Walk me through how you would architect this. And we do really is we do it very much like we do our own kind of internal conversations. Is that we're here to collaborate with you. Like we're going to ask probing questions the same way we would ask those probing questions if we were doing this when you were on the team. We would be like, well, what about this? And what about this? And kind of refining that scope. And like that's about like the first half of the conversation. And I've found that you can usually get within about 10 minutes. Do they know what they're talking about?
Yeah.
Or do they not? And I don't care, honestly, what the answers are. We don't even have to say, like, it has to be a Rails app, even though we are, and we're hiring people who can contribute in a Rails app. And for front-end engineers, we're hiring for people who would feel comfortable learning a little bit of Ruby enough to kind of start, working in ERB and stuff. But and be able to, like, run a Rails app on your machine and kind of troubleshoot as needed. But, like, it doesn't have to be that. Or they don't have to be using the front-end tools that we're using. I don't care what the answer is. Like, I care that you can articulate what the answer is. I care that it's clear that you've got a vision in your head of like where you want to take it, and that when I ask those probing questions, or the other engineer asks those probing questions, that you're able to be like, that's a good point. Either defend, I hear what you're saying, but XYZ, it's already handled, or we can handle that later, or we can easily incorporate that in, or kind of we're taking like, oh, that's a good point, I hadn't considered that, well, here's what we could do differently, and just roll with it. I prefer people who've come from smaller teams before, because there's nowhere to hide. If you're coming from an Amazon, you're touching one small slice of a thing.
You also had a lot more support structures in that sort.
You had a lot more support structure, and it's definitely not like a better or worse. When we have had to like let people go, it's frequently not because they're like bad engineers. It's because there is somewhere else that they're going to be successful, and they're not going to be successful here with the kind of loosey-goosiness of it, or the kind of bootstrappy parts of some of the things. And some people are really interested in doing that. Some people want to check in the morning, have a list of checkboxes to check, and then leave at the end of the day. And that's fine. I do not want to tell anybody that that's not a reasonable way to live. If you're waiting to be told what to do, this is maybe not the team for you. And then the second half of the conversation really just revolves around, let's talk about what you've done. What are you proud of? One of my favorite questions, especially when I'm hiring for like a senior engineer or a hire, is tell me about a time you took down production. And which can sometimes feel like a gotcha. So I will frequently, if there's any kind of hesitation on their part, I will list the last time we brought down production. Like, here's what we did. And then I ask them, what did you learn? Because that's what I care about. If you've never brought down production and you're calling yourself a senior engineer, I genuinely question whether you're a senior engineer. Like how hard are you trying? And how do you learn from your mistakes? What do you take away? And if they take away, oh, everybody's against me. If they take away, it was my boss's fault. If they take away, QA really dropped the ball, I'm less interested in continuing the conversation with those people. But if their takeaway was, it turned out that we were testing the wrong things, and so we changed our CI process. It turned out that, we had built this too complex, so we simplified it, or something like that. Again, I don't really care about the specifics. I care about their ability to think about the problem and kind of like rotate it in their head a little bit and see, oh, here's what we missed. We're not going to make that mistake again. I'm going to make a different mistake tomorrow.
Yeah. And you will make mistakes. A similar technique I used, and you feel free to steal this, is I would have folks bring their own code. to an interview. Yeah, and then just we get around and like that same sort of like probing questions, like throw their code up on the screen. I don't care what it is, like whatever esoteric language you want it to be in, whatever you're happy with, whatever you want to show off. I would actually tell people, bring me the code you hate that you've written. No one ever took me up on that, but I swear to God, if anybody ever did, they would have gotten hired on the spot. Like
that's the best. That's the best.
Yeah.
Similarly, I love asking people, what's your favorite thing? Like for backend engineer, what's your favorite thing about Ruby? What's your least favorite thing about Ruby? And the people who have an answer for what's their least favorite thing about Ruby are by far tend to be much stronger engineers. People are like, oh, I love it. Like, again, are you really trying? Like if you can't list 6 things that you don't like about your favorite thing, then how much are you paying attention? That like, it's not about complaining, but it's about like having an opinion, and it's about having a sense of what is good.
Yeah.
And we don't even have to agree.
Yeah.
It's actually important that we don't always agree on what we think is good, because that's where the work is.
Yeah, lots of times. So what are you excited about going forward? Like where does Dribbble or your own work go from here?
Oh, that's a very good question. We, for those who were paying attention to Dribbble, this is not new information, but with it, over the last few years, we really pivoted from being a social network first to being our main focus is being how can we help our members make a living doing that. And so that's where we introduced the marketplace into the Dribbble app itself, and that came with some kind of like shifts in priorities and so on. And we took about a year building that, kind of the MVP, and we've spent maybe the last year really like refining that. But where we're really focused on right now is how do we continue to widen that funnel? How do we bring more leads to the designers who are looking for work? How do we bring more high quality leads? As we've learned, is very much the balancing act. Like we can turn the dial for quantity. We can turn the dial for quantity. No one's happy if the dial's on either extreme, but we want to make sure that people find value in bringing, logging into Dribbble.com every day and looking at the project board, or looking at their inbox and seeing the people that have reached out. They're like, I like this logo you did. Can you do a logo for me? And facilitating that as well as the larger agencies who are finding work on the site. And actually, we're just having strategy sessions just this week with the exec team of what's the the rest of the year hold of it's really all about how do we continue to refine that funnel.
I spent a chunk of my career building MarTech products, right? Where marketing technology stuff, where it's I ended up building a lot of the sort of what you're describing is sort of like a marketplace situation, right? Where you have inventory and then you have to get a buyer for that inventory. And how do you build something that can work for both ends of this market?
How do you both it is honestly 90% of the questions that we ask about anything is it's not an either or. It's we really do need to both it. But we need to continue bringing in strong designers and demonstrating to them why it's worth participating in the community, while we're also bringing in high intent qualified buyers who are looking for work, and really kind of distinguishing ourselves from maybe the Fivers of the world. It's from moment one when we really locked in on the marketplace strategies. We're not looking for a race to the bottom. What we're looking for doing is and that's really why we articulate it as we want people to be able to make a living doing this. It's not just about cranking out $5 logos. It's about really, can we help you foster a relationship with these clients and continue to, the clients benefit, you benefit. And if you both are benefiting, then we're benefiting too. And that keeps paying for the servers, that then keeps expanding, which then keeps everything going. Everyone's incentives are aligned, and that makes me feel much more comfortable than, say, other organizations that operate in similar spaces that I would be less excited to participate in. That kind of virtuous cycle is what keeps it going. And speaking purely as on the engineering side, because the users don't care about our tech debt, we very much do. Over the keep mentioning kind of the ebbs and flows and highs and lows of over the last 13 years. Sometimes it's no, we just got to get to the end of the week kind of stuff, and we'll deal with the technical debt later. But right now we have a feature that needs to ship because it's going to pay for everything. And over the last couple of years, we not only pivoted the app, but we've also just paid down just tremendous. We refer to it as platform health work is the euphemism.
Oh, that's good framing. I like that. I might steal that. That's good.
It's not really paying down debt, even though maybe we are, but that encompasses, it also encompasses like bug fixes and things like that. But we just rolled out like a Rails 7.2 upgrade, because every time we're like close to caught up, there's another like few releases. But and like it was just had some conversations with some of the other engineers, and like kind of laying out, in that context of what are we doing for the next 3 months or the next 6 months, is also like, what are we doing? What's the not chip away work? Like what's the stuff that we're actually going to need to put on the roadmap? Because we're going to need, I'm going to need my principal backend engineer working on, I need him for like a month on this and really defining what that is. And so we're looking at containerizing. We're running on long-running EC2 instances that we're managing with Salt, and that's a system that's working really well for us. And it was kind of an easy stop off when OpsWorks was scaled down. That's what we had been using to manage our infrastructure with Chef. And this is more of a kind of a sidestep, but like, every time we have a DDoS outage, one of the bullet points on the kind of like the takeaways there is, if we were running, if the XYZ changes to our infrastructure, this wouldn't have been a DDoS. This, we almost certainly would have been able to like absorb it before the WAF kicked in, and so I think we've kicked down enough of the like large boulders and the like existential, we have to get to like a new enough version of Ruby. We have to get to a new enough version of Rails. We have to get off this library that was, hasn't had an update in 5 years, kind of thing. That we're like asking ourselves, wait a second, is this next? Is like, and now we're having to turn into the like really define the hard work of defining what the North Star is. Like, this is what we want to build toward. And so we can ask, then we can like, well, what's the order of operations, moving from Unicorn to Puma? Do we do that before or do we do that after? It'll be easier after, but if we do it, because then it's just changing the task definition. But then there's all these problems we would have to solve for serving, Unicorn behind Nginx in a container that we don't want to deal with maybe. And we've had this conversation with various engineers many times over the last like year, as we're kind of like feeling it getting on the horizon. And we always end up with like, well, it's all trade-offs. And it's like, these are the 18 different paths we can take. And now we're getting to the part where we actually have to make a decision. And that involves really getting it on paper. Like, what is the goal? What is the outcome that we want?
Yeah. Always start with that. And then when you work backwards, right, everything starts to get clearer when it's like, we know this is where we're going to be in this much time. And then you just work backwards to what do we have to do to actually make that happen? And then,
I don't know that we even need much more specificity than containers, but like that's all that we've had so far. Is like, no, we need to get there. Like, because we have a little more on ECS, and we love it. It's working perfectly. Like, deploys are just one button, and like we want the main app to get there now too. And so if we're building a new app, it would be easy because you get like dev containers, you get all that stuff out of the box. But this is a mature app. We're looking at. There's some libraries that are tough to install. We're like, do we need these? Like, can we change the app to not need WK-HTML to PDF anymore? Because that's a dead project now. It's fine, it worked. It will continue to work for some time, but
I've had difficulty installing that myself with a couple of like long, what I like to call well-loved Ruby applications.
Yep.
It's like
it's a beautiful.
You start to know a handful of gems that when they're in the gem file, you're like, oh, I'm gonna have a long day.
Like, we're gonna have a fun one. We still have one thing that is using paperclip. I'm very embarrassed to admit that.
Oh no, it's fine.
all stuff that's written in a while has been using Shrine, but our avatars are still using paperclip, and we're like, we gotta. That's just gonna stop working one of these days.
We can end this by making you feel a little bit better. So I had a client last year, had one of these well-loved Rails apps. They were still running Factory Girl. So not Factory Bot, Factory Girl. Right? I was like,
that does make me feel better.
Yeah, see? Cool.
I was about to get all up in arms, so like, so are we. And then they're like, no, we're running Factory Bot. We've made that transition.
Cool. That was close. All right, Patrick, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day today. I really appreciate it. If we wanted to follow along, where could we do that?
I'm moderately active on Blue Sky. It is not worth following me there, but come to Dribbble.com if you or anyone you know cares about graphic design or is just. I come in as a fan, just as like part of why I joined the company is I'm a fan of graphic design. I'm a fan of design generally. I have no aptitude whatsoever, but I can make servers work, and like that's the way I was able to contribute. So even if you don't yourself aren't a designer, I encourage you to come to Dribbble.com. Just look at the cool shit that people are doing. I'm a big fan of our community. I'm a big fan of the work that they're doing, and that's what inspires me every day to do the hard work that is maintaining an app. And I encourage everybody to do the same. And if you know a designer, send them our way too. And if we can help them, make a living at it, then everybody's day's better.
Yeah, and I think not most importantly, but also importantly, if you're looking to hire a designer, come to Dribbble.
Hire a designer.
Got lots of them.
There's many of them eager for work, and there's some of the best designers in the world are active there, and you want to hire them.
All right, awesome. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Take it easy, man.
All right, see you.
Bye.
That was Patrick Byrne, Vice President of Engineering at Dribbble. 3 things that struck me from that conversation. 1, process you added to solve last year's pain often becomes this year's pain. Whatever's closest to production deserves your team's highest priority. And if you've never brought down production, you might want to ask yourself how hard you're really trying. If this was useful, follow the hallway track wherever you're listening so that when the next one shows up, it'll already be there for you. I also write a weekly newsletter called Expedite over at getaxiomatic.com. Well, I shoot for weekly. It isn't always weekly. It's more of this kind of thinking, but on a slightly irregular publishing cadence. And go check out Dribbble, 3 Bs. Some of the best designers in the world hang out there. Thanks, Patrick. See you next time, and see you next time I'm in Minneapolis.